What's the hardest thing about writing? Well, it's getting started. Maybe you're having a hard time coming up with a story idea, or you're stuck on where to take your story next. If you want a way into a story or a way through, I have 9 story starters to help you. This free PDF is full of story seeds and prompts to get you going. To download your 9 story starters, go to nancypanuccio.com/start. That's Nancy with an I, Panuccio with 2 C's, nancypanuccio.com/start. Okay, so no reason to write out every piece of dialogue because that could become tedious for your reader and they'll zone out. You want the reader to slide down the page and take in every word. You want to stick to the essence of the dialogue, not the prelude to it, not every single thing they would say. Writer Unleashed is for you, a writer who has a story you want to bring onto the page and into the hearts and minds of readers. I'm Nancy Panuccio, writer, editor, and writing coach. And each week, we'll explore techniques, mindsets, and inspiration for writing stories readers can't put down. Thanks for spending some time with me today. Now let's begin. When I first started writing, my characters never spoke to one another. I pretty much told my stories in summary. And the reason I avoided dialogue is I just didn't know how to write it without it sounding forced, boring, or trite. Now, on the surface, dialogue is when 2 or more characters talk to one another. But like any other story element, dialogue is a compressed way to advance your story, to have your characters reveal, admit, lie, accuse, or try to hide something. It's an economical way to define characters and their relationships to one another. Characters are revealed in relationship to one another, and dialogue is a powerful tool to do this. But dialogue is one of the trickiest elements to master. It's not a transcript or complete rendering of the way humans really speak. Story dialogue is actually more coherent than real-life conversation. It's shaped, it's concise, it's sharp, it's concentrated. It's an approximation of real-life conversation. We want it to sound real, but without all the boring, tedious, insignificant parts. And there are 3 common problems I see with dialogue. Number 1, it's mundane. For example, there's a lot of throat clearing between characters before they get to anything interesting. So we get everything the characters would say pit for pat. Number 2, it's expository. The characters are telling each other the story rather than acting it out in real time. So the dialogue is being substituted for action, and it's robbing the reader of anticipating what might happen or to interpret what's not being said. And number 3, it's tedious. It's not broken up with telling gestures or some activity. We don't see the characters interacting in the place where they're engaging with one another, and that makes the dialogue tedious to read. So here are 5 exercises to help you avoid these mistakes and master your dialogue. Now, I have a companion worksheet to this episode with all these exercises written for you, so stay with me to the end to know how to grab that. So here we go. 5 exercises to help you master dialogue. Exercise number 1, secrets. I learned this from Mark Svenvold in one of my first fiction writing workshops years and years and years ago. Here's the exercise. Write a dialogue scene between two people who are keeping a secret from one another. Neither character reveals the secret to the other. Don't reveal the secret to the reader. So you're going to put these characters together in a confined space. The purpose of this exercise is to create tension from what the characters are not saying to one another, what they're trying to hide. So for example, a wife and husband are sitting in the living room at 2:30 a.m. So they're in a confined space. The wife's secret is that she's just come home after being with her lover. His secret is he knows about the affair. So with this example, I might write something like this. They were sitting under the sallow light of the chandelier. I need a glass of wine first, she said. Tea would be better, said her husband. He stood up and walked through the swinging doors to the kitchen, and just before the doors swooshed close, a tuft of his white hair flailed in the air. She reached for her own hair, stretching out the curls, beginning to dry in tight ringlets against the nape of her neck. She spoke to him through the door. That damn fog, did you see it out there? I couldn't see a foot in front of me. He didn't reply. She heard him moving about in the kitchen, the water rising in the kettle, and knew from the opening and closing of cabinets and his long expelled breaths that he couldn't find the cardamom. She'd moved it the day before, but he didn't ask where it was, and she didn't offer to tell him. The light in the living room was harsh, so she stood up and dimmed the chandelier until the bulbs inside the crystals flickered like candles. Her husband came into the room and handed her a steaming mug of chamomile and milk. We're out of cardamom, he said, turning the lights up, illuminating the room like a hospital. James, it's 2:30 in the morning, she said, closing her eyes. I want to look at you, he said. He sat down on the opposite chair and watched her over the rim of his cup through the steam. Okay, so what's great about this exercise is that you can generate a whole story out of it. It creates tension for the reader because they know something's up. They notice the subtext. There's observation, there's action. They're doing something while they're having this conversation, but it also starts in the middle of something. Now, the reader will be suspicious of the wife here, but we get a sense that the husband knows something. We don't know what that something is yet. So there's tension. Neither character is letting on their secret. You, as the author, know both their secrets, but you're withholding it from the reader. So exercise number 1, secrets. Okay, on to exercise number 2, battle for position. The playwright Harold Pinter, who wrote one of my favorite plays of all time, Betrayal, which was also a movie, talks about creating drama from the battle for position. The necessary tension arises, he says, from having people in a confined space battling over dominance and over what tools they would use to achieve dominance and how they would try to undermine the other person's dominance. Here's an example from Neil Gaiman's fantasy novel, American Gods. The protagonist, Shadow, has spent 3 years in prison, and a few days before he's set to be released, he learns that his wife has just died in a car crash. So he's released a little early to attend her funeral. And on the plane, on the way to the funeral, he meets this mysterious man, Mr. Wednesday, who somehow knows his name and other details and offers him a job. Now, Shadow doesn't trust this guy and keeps refusing to even entertain the idea. Listen to how each character battles for position. I've got a job for you, Shadow. A roar of engines, the little plane jerked forward into takeoff, pushing Shadow back into his seat. Then they were airborne, and the airport lights were falling away below them. Shadow looked at the man in the seat next to him. Okay, so then he goes on to describe the man, his hair, eyes, height, his expensive suit, etc. And then the man asks, "Aren't you going to ask me what kind of job? How do you know who I am?" The man chuckled. "Oh, it's the easiest thing in the world to know what people call themselves. A little thought, a little luck, a little memory. Ask me what kind of job." "No," said Shadow. The attendant brought him another glass of beer, and he sipped at it. "Why not?" "I'm going home. I've got a job waiting for me there. I don't want another job." The man's craggy smile did not change outwardly, but now he seemed actually amused. "You don't have a job waiting for you at home," he said. "Meanwhile, I am offering you a perfectly legal job. Good money, limited security, fringe benefits. Hell, if you live that long, I could throw in a pension plan. You think you'd like one of those?" Shadow said, "You could have seen my name on my boarding pass or on the side of my bag." The man said nothing. "Whoever you are," said Shadow, "you couldn't have known I was going to be on this plane. I didn't know I was going to be on this plane, and if my plane hadn't been diverted to St. Louis, I wouldn't have been. My guess is you're a practical joker. Maybe you're hustling something, but I think we'll have a better time if we end this conversation here." Okay, so that's the disagreement. The man is hell-bent on Shadow taking this job for reasons we don't yet know, and Shadow keeps refusing it. And he undermines the man by hypothesizing how he knows his name, saying he's a prankster or some kind of con man. And the man, Mr. Wednesday, tells him he has no job waiting for him and that his only choice is taking this job because he's an ex-con. Okay, so here's the exercise. I want you to act this out with a fellow writer. Maybe you're in a writer's group, or team up with another writer over Zoom. We did this once in a workshop. I think this was also from Mark Svenbold, and it was a lot of fun. So you're going to make up a situation involving two people who disagree about something. For example, two friends have planned to steal something and one of them gets cold feet. Or a landlord and a tenant disagree about the terms of a lease. Next, record your dialogue as you act out the scene. Now, don't decide what you're going to say ahead of time. This is pure improvisation. Just take 5 minutes. Then transcribe the dialogue exactly as it was said word for word. Read over the transcribed dialogue and then cut it down to the most salient parts. Ask yourself, how much of the original dialogue is useful for your story? How much can you summarize? Are there lines you want to keep? Then write the scene using your transcribed dialogue as your start and shape it to the needs of your scene. You probably won't use all of the original dialogue, and that is the point. The objective here is to hear how real life talk is repetitive, it goes off topic, it's disjointed, it's rambling, it's mundane. This also trains your writer's ear to transform actual speech into carefully crafted dialogue. Now, if you don't have a partner, just take two characters who disagree about something. There's a battle for position, and each character is trying to get the upper hand. Take a situation between two people and just free write. Then look at what you have and cut it down to its essence. Cut all the boring parts. Shape it to serve the disagreement between these two characters. Trim it down to its most salient points. Okay, on to exercise number 3, verbal dance. I learned this from Pamela Painter, who used to teach at Vermont College of Fine Arts. Here's the exercise. Write a dialogue between two people who know each other, each taking the opposite side of an issue or problem. Now, this is a slight variation on exercise 2, but the main difference is that these two characters are not adversaries. So it's not the protagonist versus the antagonist. This exercise comes in handy when your characters like or love each other, and there's no animosity or distrust or any major conflict between them. So the issue should be something immediate and particular. For example, the two characters may differ on whether they should spend money on a vacation or put it in the savings account. Should we go to the Hamptons for the summer or to Italy? Should we cook dinner or go to Olive Garden? So you want to keep it simple, but make sure it's emotionally close to both characters. So both speakers should be equally convincing. Don't take sides. Don't load the argument on one side or the other. Make each person distinct in the way they speak, their vocabulary, their tone. And look for what the conversation reveals about the speaker's relationship to one another. Too often I see dialogue where all the characters agree because there's no real need for them to disagree. There's no inherent situation that might arise in conflict. But even if both characters ultimately want the same thing, there can still be conflict. There can still be cross purposes. The cross purposes can be that both characters have just different ways of getting what they want. They have opposite views on an issue or problem. Here's a great example from the novel Middlesex by Jeffrey Eugenides. Now, to set the stage, both Milton and Tessie want to have a daughter. They're hell-bent on conceiving a daughter, and Uncle Pete has told them that sperm carrying the male chromosome swim faster than sperm carrying the female chromosome, and that in order to have a girl baby, a couple should have sex 24 hours prior to ovulation. Then one evening, Milton comes home with a present, a jewelry box tied with a ribbon. Here's the dialogue. "What's this for?" Tessie asked suspiciously. "What do you mean, what is it for?" "It's not my birthday. It's not our anniversary. So why are you giving me a present?" "Do I have to have a reason to give you a present? Go on, open it." Tessie crumbled up one corner of her mouth, unconvinced. But it was difficult to hold a jewelry box in your hand without opening it. So finally, she slipped off the ribbon and snapped the box open. Inside, on black velvet, was a thermometer. "A thermometer," said my mother. "That's not just any thermometer," said Milton. "I had to go to 3 different pharmacies to find one of these." "A luxury model, huh?" "That's right," said Milton. "That's what you call a basal thermometer. It reads the temperature down to 1/10 of a degree." He raised his eyebrows. "Normal thermometers only read every 2/10. This one does it every 10th. Put it in your mouth." "I don't have a fever," said Tessie. "This isn't about a fever. You use it to find out what your base temperature is. It's more accurate and precise than a regular fever-type thermometer. Next time, bring me a necklace." Okay, so Milton persists. He goes more into the science of getting a girl chromosome, what he learned from Uncle Pete, and how the basal thermometer works. But after her husband gives her the science to persuade her to use this thermometer, Tessie says nothing. She puts the thermometer into the box, closes it, and hands it back to her husband. And here's how the scene ends. "Okay," he said, "fine. Suit yourself. We may get another boy, number 2. If that's the way you want it, that's the way it'll be." I'm not so sure we're going to have anything at the moment, replied my mother. Okay, so with this exercise, the subtext is about which of the two characters has more power and exploits that power. In this scene, Tessie has more power and she's willing to exploit it. This happens in all relationships, even between people who love each other and get along. In any dialogue scene, there will always be a power imbalance, even if it's subtle. Now, Tessie does have the upper hand here because she's the one who's going to give birth. She doesn't like the idea of this thermometer at all. She doesn't buy her husband's science, but notice how playful the dialogue is. It's a dance. So write a scene between two people who take the opposite side of an issue or problem. The objective here is to learn to use dialogue to reveal character and human dynamics. So exercise number 3, verbal dance. Okay, on to exercise 4, the Twizzler effect. I learned this term from Laura Belgray, who wrote a book of essays. The title's a little risque, so I probably can't say it on the air, but I will link to her book in this episode's show notes on my website. And she tells the story of the show Sex and the City, where Carrie and Samantha were, I think, on a bed having a conversation and went back and forth and back and forth. And the director thought the conversation was going a little flat. So he didn't want to have just the back and forth, back and forth. He wanted to give them something to do while they were having this conversation. So he gave them Twizzlers to eat while they were having this conversation, and it changed the whole dynamic. Here's the exercise. Write a scene in which a character's body, as well as his mind, is engaged in doing something. Now, acting teachers use this technique a lot with their students when practicing scenes. They never want them in a scene just talking. So, for example, if a couple is fighting or breaking up, what are they doing while they're having this argument? Maybe they're getting ready to go to bed. She's brushing her teeth and he's hanging up his clothes. Or they're getting ready to go out. She's putting on her makeup and he's putting on his shirt. But they're having a conversation while involved in some activity. So think of interspersing action within your dialogue. Your characters may be building something or repairing something, exercising. They may be visiting somewhere, having dinner, or cooking breakfast. They may be painting an apartment or packing for a vacation. They may be eating in a restaurant, or they're in a bar having drinks. So you want to let your characters do something in the dialogue. Have them engaged in some activity while they're speaking to one another. Here's a great example from Bobby Ann Mason's story, Shiloh. Now, to set the scene, the story revolves around a married couple, Leroy and Norma Jean. Leroy is unemployed because he's recovering from an accident, and he suspects his wife is tiring of him being home and unemployed, and he tries to win her back by telling her he's going to build her a log cabin. And at the end of the story, they pack a picnic and they go to Shiloh, the site of an American battlefield. They then find a picnic spot near the cemetery. And here's how the scene plays out. Norma Jean has brought a picnic cooler with pimiento sandwiches, soft drinks, and yodels. Leroy eats a sandwich and then smokes a joint, hiding it behind the picnic cooler. Norma Jean has quit smoking altogether. She is picking cake crumbs from the cellophane wrapper like a fussy bird. Leroy says, so the boys in gray ended up in Corinth. The Union soldiers zapped them finally, April 7th, 1862. They both know that he doesn't know any history. He is just talking about some of the historical plaques they have read. He feels awkward, like a boy on a date with an older girl. They are still just making conversation. Corinth is where Mama eloped to, says Norma Jean. They sit in silence and stare at the cemetery for the Union dead and beyond at a tall cluster of trees. Campers are parked nearby, bumper to bumper, and small children in bright clothing are cavorting and squealing. Norma Jean wads up the cake wrapper and squeezes it tightly in her hand. Without looking at Leroy, she says, "I want to leave you." Leroy takes a bottle of Coke out of the cooler and flips off the cap. He holds the bottle poised near his mouth, but cannot remember to take a drink. Finally, he says, "No, you don't." Okay, so the scene continues. She wants a divorce. He doesn't. They go back and forth. He remembers to take a drink of his Coke, and at one point he says, "Don't do me this way." All right, so there's a battle for position. But they're having this conversation while engaging in an activity, a picnic. So explore how various activities and settings can change what happens within a scene. So exercise number 4, the Twizzler effect. Okay, on to the last exercise, exercise number 5, indirect dialogue. This is summarized dialogue. Often writers will give a whole diatribe of what people will say, where summarized dialogue would be much more efficient, much more powerful, and much easier to read. Here's an example from The Glass Castle by Jeanette Walls. She starts the dialogue scene with a summary of her exchange with her mother rather than the whole conversation. "It always took Mom a few days to get back to me, but when I heard from her, she sounded, as always, cheerful and casual, as though we'd had lunch the day before. I told her I wanted to see her and suggested she drop by the apartment, but she wanted to go to a restaurant. She loved eating out, so we agreed to meet for lunch at her favorite Chinese restaurant." Okay, so notice we don't get the whole conversation pit for pat. She summarizes the conversation with her mother that leads up to their meeting. So it's indirect dialogue. It's summarized. She only goes into direct spoken dialogue when they're at the restaurant. So here's the spoken dialogue. "She waved enthusiastically when she saw me. 'It's my baby girl,' she called out. I kissed her cheek. Mom had dumped all the plastic packets of soy sauce and duck sauce and hot and spicy mustard from the table into her purse. Now she emptied a wooden bowl of dried noodles into it as well. A little snack for later on," she explained. "We ordered. Mom chose the seafood delight. You know how I love my seafood," she said. Okay, then she moves into indirect dialogue, a summary. She started talking about Picasso. She'd seen a retrospective of his work and decided he was hugely overrated. All the Cubist stuff was gimmicky, as far as she was concerned. He hadn't really done anything worthwhile after his Rose period. So she summarizes part of their conversation so we can get back to the heart of the conversation. It's indirect dialogue. And then she moves back into direct dialogue, the spoken dialogue. "I'm worried about you," I said. "Tell me what I can do to help." Her smile faded. "What makes you think I need your help?" "I'm not rich," I said, "but I have some money. Tell me what it is you need." She thought for a moment. "I could use an electrolysis treatment." Be serious. "I am serious. If a woman looks good, she feels good." "Come on, Mom." I felt my shoulders tightening up the way they invariably did during these conversations. "I'm talking about something that could help you change your life, make it better." "You want to help me change my life?" Mom asked. "I'm fine. You're the one who needs help. Your values are all confused." "Mom, I saw you picking through trash in the East Village a few days ago." Well, people in this country are too wasteful. It's my way of recycling. She took a bite of her seafood delight. Why didn't you say hello? I was ashamed, Mom. I hid. Mom pointed her chopsticks at me. You see, she said, right there. That's exactly what I'm saying. You're way too easily embarrassed. Your father and I are who we are. Accept it. And what am I supposed to tell people about my parents? Just tell the truth, Mom said. That's simple enough. Okay, so no reason to write out every piece of dialogue because that could become tedious for your reader and they'll zone out. You want the reader to slide down the page and take in every word. You want to stick to the essence of the dialogue, not the prelude to it, not every single thing they would say, just the dialogue that reveals characters and their relationships and is relevant to the story. And the only dialogue that's relevant to this story centers around her mother's homelessness. So it's okay to summarize. Here's the exercise. First, look at a dialogue scene from a book you admire. Find where the summarized dialogue is versus the spoken dialogue, like we just did with this scene from The Glass Castle. Then go to a scene of dialogue from your own story and look at where you can summarize the dialogue rather than give the entire exchange pit for pat. So exercise 5, indirect dialogue. I also want to encourage you to re-listen to this episode to see where the dialogue is doing multiple things in each of these story excerpts. For example, this dialogue from The Glass Castle is doing a few things we already talked about. There's a verbal dance. They have conflicting views, but it's not a contentious exchange. They do disagree on one particular issue, though, one particular problem, Mom's homelessness. They love each other, but they have different life philosophies that clash, so there's a battle for position. Notice, too, the Twizzler effect. They're eating a meal. And it uses summarized dialogue, indirect, and direct spoken dialogue. Okay, let's recap. We talked about common dialogue mistakes, mundane dialogue, expository dialogue, and tedious dialogue. We talked about 5 exercises to help you avoid these mistakes and master dialogue. Exercise number 1, secrets. Number 2, battle for position. Number 3, verbal dance. Exercise number 4, the Twizzler effect. And number 5, indirect dialogue. So there you go. 5 exercises to help you master dialogue. Now, I have a free worksheet with all these exercises written down so you have them handy to practice. You can grab yours at nancypanuccio.com/dialogue. That's Nancy with an I, Panuccio with 2 C's, nancypanuccio.com/dialogue. I hope these exercises help you master dialogue in your scenes. Use these to generate new stories, new scenes, or rewrite existing dialogue. Writing dialogue is a practice, so have fun with these. So there you have it. Thanks for hanging out with me today. And if you know any writers who need some support in their writing, please share this episode or the Writer Unleashed podcast in general. And if you love what you're listening to, subscribe on your favorite listening platform and please leave me a review. Reading how this podcast impacts your writing truly lights me up and helps me create topics for the show. Till next time, keep writing, and I'll talk to you soon.